A ceasefire agreement for Gaza. Cautious hope among Palestinians of an end to 2 years of genocide. US President Donald Trump announced the deal after putting pressure on Israel to agree. What impact has the war had on Israeli-US relations? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. So, a ceasefire deal gets a cautious welcome from Palestinians after 2 years of Israel's genocide that's killed more than 67,000 people in Gaza, most of which has been destroyed. US President Donald Trump has been centre stage in announcing the agreement between Israel and Hamas. Like his predecessor, Joe Biden, he has continued to supply Israel with vast quantities of weapons for its genocide, as well as political cover with vetoes on the UN Security Council. But, unlike Biden, he has managed to steer home a deal, forcing Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do what he wants. Opinion polls in the United States suggest support is waning for its foremost ally in the Middle East, with one indicating 59% of Americans hold a negative view of Israel. The sentiment is also being felt within Trump's MAGA support base, with right-wing member of Congress Marjorie Taylor Greene calling Israel's action genocide even before leftist Senator Bernie Sanders. So has the genocide in Gaza led to a fundamental shift in the relationship between the United States and Israel? Or with weapons still flowing, will it be business as usual in the long term, with all the consequences that has for Palestinians and the Middle East? We'll discuss all this with our guest shortly, but first this report from Alexandra Byers.
A surprise interruption in the White House and a glimmer of hope for 2 million Palestinians in Gaza.
I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly.
Then, in a post on his social media platform, Trump confirmed Hamas and Israel had agreed to the first phase of a ceasefire deal. Celebrations in Gaza were immediate. The hope that after more than 2 years, the unrelenting brutality of Israel's genocide may be about to end.
Thank God for the ceasefire, the end of bloodshed and killing. I am not the only happy one. All of Gaza is happy, all the Arab people and the world. Thank you, and all the love to those who stood with us.
Relief in Israel, too.
I couldn't be happier. The fact that finally hostages are coming back, that the deal was signed, that the war is over.
The agreement is the outcome of days of intense negotiations in Egypt, with the US, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey taking part in the final round. Donald Trump's supporters will not be the only ones viewing it as his biggest diplomatic achievement, finalized a day ahead of the announcement of the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, which he's long desired. The president revealed his 20-point plan for peace during a meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister at the White House last month. Publicly, he appeared to give Israel his full backing, threatening all hell would break out in Gaza if Hamas didn't make a deal. But privately, Trump was reportedly coming down harder on Benjamin Netanyahu than any previous American president. Israel's bombing of Hamas negotiators in Qatar, a key U.S. ally, had infuriated Trump. It was seen by many as a huge miscalculation, and Trump seized the chance to pressure Netanyahu, forcing him to apologize to the Qatari leadership.
Thank you very much for hosting.
But also pushing him to agree to his peace plan, which had been drafted during extensive meetings with Arab and Muslim leaders in the weeks before. A lasting deal would mean a resumption of humanitarian aid, food, water, fuel, and medicine in Gaza, and the chance to start rebuilding. Trump's reported to be planning to travel to the region this weekend for the signing of the deal. But Palestinians remain cautious.
This news puts our mind at ease, but we fear the period that will follow the first phase because Netanyahu can't be trusted. We want guarantees that are stronger than Netanyahu.
Israel continued to bomb Gaza on Thursday, despite the announcement. Explosions interrupting cautious celebrations, and mixed emotions as many survivors reflect on the 67,000 Palestinians killed by Israel's 2 years of a war that turned into a genocide. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
All right, let's get straight into this with our guests. In London, we have Yossi Mekelberg, who's Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House. In Boston, in the United States, there's Rami, Distinguished Fellow at the American University of Beirut. And also in London, Tahani Mustafa, who's a visiting fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Very warm welcome to all of you. Yossi, I'd like to start with you first of all. So Benjamin Netanyahu is at pains to hail President Trump in all this, but is he doing it through gritted teeth, do you think? Has he been forced into a corner on this by a newly aggressive American approach?
I think gritted teeth is probably an understatement. He needs to spin and sell now to his own coalition an agreement that probably only a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he will describe as disastrous for Israel. But here we are. If there is anyone that can have any influence on Netanyahu is President Trump. And we're in a day that I'm thinking we are allowed to be a bit more optimistic. It's probably a better day than we have experienced for many months. But it also shows that if there is an element in the international community that can influence Israel to stop such a war, such bloodshed, is the United States. And it makes us all to think why it didn't happen long before. It could save many thousands of life in the process. At the same time, we also need to ask beyond the, we hear already that President Trump plans to visit Israel and to deliver a speech in the Knesset, whether beyond the important, very important end of war and the return of the hostages and the release of prisoners and humanitarian aid is out of the 20 point. It's going to stop here and not beyond it, or it's going to see the entire 20 points, including what implies by the end of it, moving into a two-state solution and the right of Palestinians for self-determination.
Okay, so to our question, does this moment mark a change in the US-Israeli relationship? Tahani, what's your sense? Are we looking now at a new dynamic between the United States and Israel?
I don't think we really are, and to be quite frank, this deal serves Israel more than it certainly serves the Palestinians. There are still a lot of old sticking points that remain in this deal, in both the immediate term when we're talking about withdrawal and hostage handover, and also in the longer term in terms of the future of who's going to govern Gaza and Hamas's disarmament. Hamas themselves were strong-armed into this deal by both the US, but also by regional states to be as flexible as they possibly can in terms of accepting this. And really, I think many have already sort of commentated on the choice that Hamas really had to make here, which was either be annihilated or accept what is at the moment the best deal that has been put on the table. Unfortunately, as with previous deals, there is absolutely no guarantee here that Israel will act in good faith. And we've seen no indication from Trump or the US administration that they will ensure that Israel acts in good faith, especially after there is a complete hostage handover, which, in terms of the timeline that's been spearheaded, we're talking about a matter of days. But after that, there hasn't been any indication that Trump is going to ensure that Israel continues to act in good faith past the first phase. What's more is even on the terms of withdrawal, we've seen in the past that Netanyahu, this Israeli administration has often rescinded on what has been agreed upon, has redrawn the lines of what has been agreed upon. Again, there's no indication that they won't do that again, or that they won't try and use any kind of pretext that they can to return back to open warfare.
That is the thing, isn't it, Rami? Because how Trump reacts to the phase two, or how Israel reacts to phase two, and then how Trump reacts to Israel if they pull out of the ceasefire, is going to be the real test of how the dynamic in this relationship has changed or not. But there are other pressures on President Trump, aren't they? How's it looking in the United States? Are we seeing the sands shift there a little bit under the US-Israeli edifice, Rami?
Oh, yes, for sure. The American government, or essentially, which is Trump, is the man who makes decisions on these issues. So Trump is reacting to two things. he's reacting to a continued shift in public opinion in the United States across the board, in all groups, including in evangelical Christians and others, who are not happy to see the United States being complicit in a genocide. And they're more and more critical. Public is much more critical of Israel. And Israel's traditional tactics of using its propaganda machinery through the U.S. media and U.S. politicians to shape American public opinion is faltering. It started about 2 years ago, and it's faltering now. They can't control or shape opinion as much as they used to. So that's one thing that he's responding to. The other one, and this impacts his electoral fortunes in the elections next year. The second thing that is going on is that the United States understands that its global strategy to remain a global power requires assertion of economic power as well as military. Military, it has massive potential and massive capabilities, as does Israel. But their combined military assault on Gaza, on Palestine, since the 1940s, has not brought about surrender by the Palestinians. So they realized at some point that military power was not going to achieve their goals. It's only going to create more problems. And so he understands, Trump, that you've got to have a calm Middle East if the U.S. wants to penetrate all the region with its investments, its military sales, etc. So these are short-term factors that are pushing Trump to change American or adjust American policy. We have no idea if it's permanent. We have no idea how deep it is.
Okay.
If he really...
Yossi, Rami, I'm just going to jump in. So, Yossi, what do you think about this, the permanence of this or not of a change in U.S.-Israeli relations? And to that question of, once the captors are released, and if Netanyahu starts bombing Palestinians in Gaza again, the key issue there is going to be how Trump reacts to see how genuinely he means this push for peace.
Some might argue that the only thing that is permanent in international relations is common interest, and there are enough common interests between the United States and Israel. Unfortunately, under the leadership of Netanyahu and the current government, actually what Israel is doing hampers American interest, national interest in the region. And then above all, the misjudgment, the complete lack of judgment of bombing Qatar in the middle of negotiation of ceasefire and attacking the mediator and the negotiator at the same time, I think made Trump think again if this is a government that he could trust. But at the same time, I don't think, we don't move between 0 and 100 and back. I think there is still close alliance between Israel and the United States, but Israel will have to prove, hopefully in due course under a different government, that it can be trusted as an ally and it can behave rationally as an actor in international affairs.
Tahani, Donald Trump has often packaged this pressure that he's been applying on Israel for peace as concern over Israel's standing in the world. So you've got to ask the question, is Trump doing it for the sake of Israel's reputation, for his reputation, or indeed his bid to try and win the Nobel Peace Prize?
It could well be a combination of both things. It could well be a combination of the U.S. Trying to prevent Israel from having to undergo any kind of accountability here, as well as a PR favor, I suppose, in terms of making Israel look like it's willing to negotiate. It is a good faith partner in negotiations. It's willing to cede and be flexible and pragmatic. And so certainly I think in that sense, it's been a successful PR exercise for Israel. On the other hand, it's been very, very clear, and I don't think Trump has made any sort of secret of that, is in the sense that this is really more of a vanity project for Trump in his pursuit for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, whether he ends up getting that or not, and whether his attention span on this conflict will remain as it is, and he will continue to be adamant to see an end to hostilities is something else entirely. And I think that's where the true test when it comes to what the actual sort of interests and rationale behind all of this really are, is how much his attention span sort of stays focused past tomorrow once the announcement is made around the Nobel Peace Prize, and past Monday once the release of hostages, according to the current timeline, once the release of hostages are handed over.
Rami, what do you think? Do you think it's just a vanity project, or is he genuinely doing this because this push for peace, because the goalposts have moved and it's time for Israel to change its modus operandi as the United States perceives?
I think it's genuine only in the sense that it is designed to help Trump and the United States. It's not a moral change of sentiment. This is the same Trump who has supported Israel outright in the genocide. I refer to the genocide now as a joint venture between the U.S. and Israel, and it has been all along. The UK was involved, Germany, others were involved, but nobody as much as the United States. So he's feeling the pressures from the global upsurge and criticism of Israel, support for Palestine, all of which has been taken by activists into the public sphere, sporting events, cultural events, political voting, etc. And polling evidence all over the world shows that publics are much more critical of Israel and the U.S. The United States, the American president and the Israeli prime minister are probably the two least trusted, least credible political leaders in the entire world. The way they've reneged on agreements, the way they've promised things that they didn't do, they've broken past agreements. They have a track record which is quite impressive in unserious diplomacy. So nobody trusts them in the Middle East. Nobody trusts Trump or Netanyahu, and that's why the people supporting the Palestinians, the Arab states and Turkey and Indonesia and all these, the people who met with Trump, they're demanding ironclad guarantees. We don't know what those guarantees are. Trump's word is not enough. Trump visiting to see the release of the hostages is not enough. And we don't know. So we just have to wait and see. But the caution that many people are expressing is justified by the behavior of the Israeli and American leaderships. But at the same time, I think it's clear that both in Israel and in the Arab countries and Palestine, people realize that we've probably reached the limit of what military power can do on both sides. And so there seems to be a desire, very broadly based, to move towards a political resolution, which is partly reflected in the Western countries' recognition of the state of Palestine, which is symbolic but also significant. So you have to look at all of these things together.
Yeah, they all combine, don't they? Yossi, how important is the relationship between the United States and Israel perceived in Israel, and how much concern is there in the country that things are changing, that the sands are shifting?
That's why it's very important. I think you look at any level, from the economic to the military, intelligence sharing, when it comes to diplomacy, and rightly or wrongly, when the United States protects Israel in international organizations. So this is such close relations that significant for Israel's security and prosperity. And I think in this case, whether it was a vanity project for Trump or not, it saves Israel from its own government, because we know that most Israelis, more than 70%, for many months supported a ceasefire and see first and foremost the return of the hostages. So the fact that the Israeli government doesn't listen, is not attentive to its own people, and it takes actually the President of the United States to do what the Israeli population wants, sends also a thing that it's actually these relations are important, especially when there is an irresponsible government as the current one.
Rami, tell us about the change in mindset that we're seeing, that the polls show, indeed, in the United States about the relationship between the United States and Israel, and the kind of the drift away from wholehearted support, even among Republicans, particularly younger Republicans, and indeed the likes, as we said before, the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, this has many dimensions. It's very heavily skewed by age. So it's younger people under the age of, say, 40, 45, who are much more critical of Israel and much more supportive of equal rights for Israel and Palestine. There's a general sentiment that Israel needs to be safe and protected and have its rights as a state. But there's also a general sentiment that the U.S. government, with taxpayer money, should not be a partner in a genocidal assault that has been named by the UN and many others around the world as a crime, a war crime. And therefore, there's a sense that morally and in terms of political culpability, people in the United States more and more don't want to be part of this process. It's very similar to what we saw, those of us old enough to remember South Africa. The trajectory today is very similar to what happened in South Africa. People get the information, they see what's going on, which now is possible with social media, and they don't want to be part of it. They insist on a higher standard of political morality. And action starts with civic groups, sporting events, culture, etc., educational collaborations, and then it slowly penetrates the political system. In Congress, if you look at Congress now, you have probably a quarter of Congress that will vote for a ceasefire, maybe even an arms embargo on Israel. This is unheard of. It used to be 98% pro-Israel and 2% pro-justice for both sides. Now it's increasing. So all of these things move together, but they move slowly. This is the problem with policy changes by governments, that the governments react to political pressures. The turning point, I believe, in the U.S. has been that political leaders are worried about their incumbency in the upcoming elections next year and some by-elections this year. So there's many reasons why people are demanding a more egalitarian, a more balanced American policy that supports Palestine and Israel, and they're demanding actions. And we're going to probably see some of these things happening in the coming months. City councils are passing resolutions. State assemblies are passing resolutions. The level of activism at the local level across the U.S., and I've been to several places recently in the Midwest and along the East Coast, and it's very, very impressive. It's very similar to the activism for the ending the Vietnam War, for the civil rights movement, for gender equality, for climate change, and what was done.
So
in South Africa.
change is very much in the air. Tahani, listening to Rami and seeing the polls, because the shift is more pronounced also amongst the Democrats, from 53% to 69% who are concerned about Israel's or the United States' relationship with Israel. What's your sense? Does that give Palestinians any hope, any optimism that things might change, that ultimately might take a few election cycles, but ultimately, this consistent, insistent flow of arms into Israel from the United States may come to an end, or at least be diminished?
Well, I think it's certainly a welcome change in terms of the shifts that they're seeing on both the political level but also grassroots. But I don't think we can really work here with time. I don't think we have that kind of time to be waiting around for that to actually translate into tangible policy change, especially given what we've seen happening in Gaza, and more importantly, what we're starting to see happen in the West Bank, where we're seeing the biggest displacements since 1967, where we're seeing the largest land grabs since the Oslo Accords, where we're starting to see large numbers of fatalities that are exceeding what we were seeing during the Second Intifada. So all of these shifts really just kind of begs the question, what is there going to be left to recognize or work with when it comes to the occupied territories and the Palestinians living there, once we actually do see the necessary tangible shifts in policy?
Yeah, Yossi, we have this recognition of a Palestinian state internationally from many nations now. And the relationship between, as we've been discussing, the relationship between Israel and the United States may well be slowly changing. But two-state solution, of course, is something that Trump says he wholly disagrees with. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, he totally disagrees with it. So in a sense, nothing's changed.
Well, I'm not so sure. I think all what we just heard about the change in public opinion in the United States, the activism, if you look as the younger generation has moved away, from 1945, I think we'll see more and more sympathy towards the underdog, the Palestinians, and Israel is coming across as the aggressor. So this is a trend that will affect eventually also policies. But at the end of the day, what we see with recognition of the Palestinian state, it's the United States and with it Israel that are isolated in the international community. The United States is the only permanent member of the United Nations not to support it. The only one in the G7 did not support Palestinian statehood. So in the end of the day, at what point the United States actually synchronize its policies with the rest of the world? The other thing, we talk so many times about how fickle is President Trump. At some point that when Israel has become more intransigent when it comes to negotiation beyond the ceasefire towards something more substantial to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he might change his mind there too and decide time is also to make a statement and recognize Palestinian state, even maybe, who knows, open an American embassy in East Jerusalem, and this definitely will be a game changer.
Okay, Rami, last word to you. It'll be very interesting to see in the United States how the pro-Israeli lobby reacts to this kind of change in the air.
The pro-Israel lobby is quite stressed out because it understands that its traditional methods, which have been wildly successful over the last century, really, are no longer as impactful. There's two reasons for that, because the news of what Israel is doing in Gaza is now easily available to everybody on their cell phones, and also because there are alternate sources of criticism, commentary, analysis within the United States, alternative media, local activists. There's tremendous activism at the local level to bring these issues up, and this is causing a huge change, and the political leadership doesn't quite know how to deal with it, and the AIPAC doesn't quite know how to deal with it. They're trying now to curtail the impact that they're losing these young voters and young people by buying some of the big media, Paramount and CBS and TikTok, and being involved, having their allies buy these. But this isn't going to work. And they're looking for different ways to try to influence people through direct and indirect methods, and I think it's a losing battle for the Israeli lobby. The pro-Israel lobby needs to simply understand that it is in the same situation as the South Africa lobby was, in the early 1990s. This is a historic moment of change, and really the two things that have to be changed to get a permanent resolution is the definition of Zionism. What does Zionism mean in practice, and what does colonialism mean in practice? Because it's the combination of Zionist ideology with Western colonialism, first the Brits and now the Americans, that has allowed Israel to do anything it wants with impunity. This is now being pressured, stressed, challenged by the entire world, officials and public opinion. And so defining Zionism, containing Zionism, and the colonial impulse from the West, appointing Tony Blair to be part of the governance of Gaza in the future is a huge colonial insult, but they try it. The Israelis and the Americans want to try it. It's not going to work. It'll be dropped. So we have to look at the wider dimensions of this process and the historical change.
Appreciate that. Great to get all your views. Everybody do appreciate your time. Yossi, Mekelberg, Rami, Khouri, and Tahani, Mustafa. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again at any time by visiting our website. aljazeera.com is the address. And for further discussion, just go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the chat, the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the whole team here, it's goodbye for now.